All right, man, peace. So, NBA superstar James Harden is certainly in the running for this year's MVP award. They're going to talk about the performance of both James Harden as well as his team, the Houston Rockets. And of course, I'm going to chime in.
James Harden and the Rockets, that's who you want to be like. They beat the Pacers last night. People, they dropped one game in the entire month of November, 12-1. But that's not good enough for James Harden. No. He's the lead leader in scoring, league leader in assists, and yet he still thinks the team can improve by a lot.
Look, let me say this about James Harden. I'm already on record as stating that even if he does have an MVP-worthy season this year, I personally would not give him the MVP just because of how he's performed in the playoffs in the last couple of years, especially last season's playoffs. But he is having an MVP caliber year thus far. And he's playing in a system that is very conducive for him to have an MVP caliber season. So it would not surprise me to see him once again, be up there around 29, 30 points a game, 11, 12 assists, and probably around 8 rebounds. And depending on how many games his team wins, if they can win 60 games this year, he will get the MVP.
A lot. Here is his quote saying that we have a long way to go. He went on in this saying that, they could do so many more things. Do you think that's true? T-Mac, do the Rockets have is their ceiling much higher than this?
Well, before T-Mac answers, let me say, I think that the Rockets don't really have a much higher ceiling than what they've shown right now. They're not a team that is going to lock down on defense, even though James Harden, let me give him credit. And this is why I say he is having an MVP caliber season. According to the advanced metrics, he is the number one defender at his position in isolation scenarios in the NBA. So I do have to give him that much credit. If he continues that, or even if he ends the season in the top 5 at his position defensively, that definitely will go a long way in bolstering his legitimacy as an MVP candidate, because we already know what he's going to bring offensively. Once again, James's problem is that he disappears in playoff games in big spots.
Well, we all know the system that they play in is very exciting. And, you got a guy that's, Steve Nash on steroids and James Harden to make.
That's basically exactly what he is. He's basically Steve Nash on steroids. When Steve Nash goes to the Hall of Fame, he should have Mike D'Antoni come up on stage with him. Because Steve was a very good point guard in Dallas. And he became an all-time great with D'Antoni and Phoenix running that system.
To make it look the way it is. They're very excited in the regular season to watch. It's going to be, I think the thing with them is how they're going to perform in the playoffs. How is he going to perform in the playoffs?
Thank you, T-Mac. Thank you, brother. At the end of the day, we already know what James Harden could do. We know he can fill it up. We know he gets buckets. Especially with the way that the NBA is played, the NBA game is played in this day and age. It's very easy to get to the basket because your 4 and your 5 man oftentimes are not even in the paint anymore. So, people really don't understand how much easier it is for these guards to score now. As I've stated in previous videos, the overall skill level of NBA players today is a little bit better as far as the face-up game is concerned. The dribble moves and things of that nature and the long-range shooting, that is better. But as far as an ability to post up, to play down low, back in the 90s, even point guards could post you up. Gary Payton, Tim Hardaway, those guys will post up, their defender and get the job done. And that also was because the 4-man and the 5-man, they could not stretch the floor out with those players. Those players were basically there to be enforcers or to get rebounds and to intimidate the other team from driving the lane. So you had to be able to score in different ways. And plus, if you tried to pull up from long range back then, the coach would pull you out of the game. Like, you couldn't do that back then. Every once in a while, you had a Dana Barros or a Kenny Smith or, guys like that who would just go off, a Mahmoud Abdul-Rauf, who would just start pulling up from 3 and they would get hot. But you really couldn't play like that back then, not like today. Today's game is just totally different. That's why when people try to compare players today to players from previous generations, it's very, very difficult. Because it is much, much easier to drive to the basket now than it was back in the previous generations. And people try to bring up the zone defense. Zone defense is nothing to NBA players. It's nothing. All a zone defense does is gives you wide open mid-range jump shots. The zone defense does nothing to to stop a top-level NBA player or even an average NBA player from being able to get his points. It actually makes the game much easier.
When the stakes are high.
Right.
Now I have them going to the Western Conference because I think they're that good, and I think they will challenge Golden State to come out of the West.
I agree. I think that they will give Golden State a challenge, even though I think that they'll lose. Because the difference between the Rockets and Golden State, once again, is going to be the defense and the overall talent. And it still remains to be seen how well Harden and Chris Paul will be able to play together in a big playoff game. Both of them have been known for coming up short in big playoff games, particularly in the second round. Chris Paul has never even gotten past the second round. So it will be very interesting to see how well they can play together under duress in a highly pressurized playoff game in the second or third round. I just don't think that they'll have what it takes to beat a Golden State who can lock down on defense when they want to and who's a little bit better in a half-court set than the Rockets are. I think that James Harden can be suckered into taking a lot of bad shots.
Really?
Yes, I think they are that good because of him and Chris Paul adding another variable of leadership that they were lacking in the past and another playmaker.
I'll say this. This is the one team that can keep up with the Warriors.
Yes.
Listen, Warriors play bad. They win, but they still score 110 points. Now, you have to score at least 110 to 125 points to beat the Warriors. You see the Cavs did that in one game.
Mm-hmm.
They can shoot with them. Now, the Rockets are capable of putting up 130 to 140 points. You're not...
Well, they're capable of putting up 130 to 140 points on the average NBA team. Are they going to be able to do that to the Warriors? Once again, when the Warriors decide to play defense, the Rockets are not going to put up 130 to 140 points on them. There may be one game in the series where the Rockets can put up 135 on them because, you know, the Warriors always have one game in a series against a good team where they just decide that they're not going to compete. So I don't doubt that there will be that one game. But for a whole series, no. And when Golden State brings their A game in regards to offense and defense, the Rockets will not be able to compete with them on both sides of the floor. And that's going to be the differentiation that will, be established between the two teams when the time comes.
You're not going to stop the Warriors defensively. They might have a bad shooting night, but a bad shooting night for them is, like I said, scoring 110 points. If they don't score 110, they're going to get to 130 on you. But the Rockets is the one team that can keep up with them out of everybody in the league.
Well, the Rockets can keep up with them as long as Golden State plays into their hands in regards to that run and gun style of play. The thing with Golden State is that Golden State can play in a multitude of different ways. They can execute in the half court, or they can run with you, and of course they can shoot with you. Now, what an intelligent team does, and that's why I give Steve Kerr a lot of credit, what an intelligent team does is they take away what you do well. They don't worry about what you do poorly because what you do poorly is going to show regardless. They want to take away what you do well. That's what the New England Patriots have done over the years. That's what Floyd Mayweather has done over the years. When you watch anyone who's excellent in their craft in a competitive environment, what they do is they take away what their competition does well. So with the Warriors, when they do play the Rockets, who I'm pretty sure that they will play, unless the Spurs go, meet them in the playoffs and, kind of show them what's what. If and when Golden State meets with the Rockets in the playoffs, I expect them to take away their three-point shooting. I expect them to try to sucker James Harden into a lot of over-dribbling. I expect them to try to frustrate Chris Paul into getting angry. Right? That's what Chris Paul does when he doesn't get his way. He gets very angry. He has anger management issues. And that has led to a lot of issues in the locker room between him and his teammates. And that will also be very interesting to see the Rockets down 3-1 to the Warriors, how Chris Paul and James Harden react with each other. So, all these things have to be established. The regular season to me is, the good teams, they like to show out in the regular season. But great teams don't worry too much about how much they show out in the regular season. You just want to be refined for the playoffs.
As far as scoring.
I got to give Mike D'Antoni credit because this formula of how he's staggering CP3 and James, it's working so far.
Yeah,
it's working
good.
at the end of games when they're on the floor together. And man, that step back three, that's just gotten so deadly. From
He
James.
is the best.
Well, step back three has always been, James' bread and butter. But the fact that D'Antoni feels like he has to stagger Chris Paul and James Harden what that tells me is that they play too much alike. And on great teams, you don't want to have too many players on your team that play too much alike, because what happens is they start to step on each other's toes, i.e. the OKC Thunder. When you have 3 ball-dominant guys who really are not that proficient in shooting, who are 3 volume shooters, and you put them together, 3 guys who've never been known for moving the ball very well, that's what you get. You're going to get struggle. So the fact that D'Antoni believes and understands that he has to stagger James Harden and Chris Paul tells me that they play a little bit too much alike. That is another thing that a great team will be able to capitalize on in a big spot. So once again, we'll see what happens with Houston.
Best
one-on-one player.
No, he is the best player to not get MVP. He's tired of this.
Well,
he is tired of
that may
coming
change.
up short on the MVP the last 2 years.
That's interesting that Paul Pierce says that James Harden is the greatest player, or maybe he means today, the best player to not win an MVP award. That's very interesting. I would have to go down the list of guys to never win an MVP award. But James Harden definitely would be top 10. You know, you also have guys like Clyde Drexler. Who else? A lot of great players that have never won an MVP award. Chris Webber would have to be up there. T-Mac would have to be up there in his prime. But T-Mac was never able to get enough team success to be considered for that award as far as regular season is concerned. You know? Well, that's very, very interesting. I would have to think about it. Patrick Ewing. No. But yeah, most of the other great players have won. So, but that would be a very interesting list to think about and try to see if I can come up with one.
I think it's his for the taking this year.
Yeah, I mean, it certainly feels like there's momentum starting to build behind him. It's time for our distant replay.
But anyway, we'll see what happens with James Harden and the Houston Rockets this year. I expect them to coast pretty much through the regular season. I think that the West has been overrated coming into the season, and the East has been very underrated. The NBA has done a very good job. I can't think of any teams in the NBA right now that have been unwatchable. Even the lesser teams, even the bad teams have been watchable. So it's good for the league. You know, even when you have a team like Orlando who's struggling, at least they're watchable, you know. So we'll see what happens. But Houston is going to pretty much just skip through the regular season because they're trying to prove something in the regular season. But you know, their real proving ground will come in the playoffs. But if James Harden continues to play on the level that he's playing, I believe that they will give him the MVP. All right, but it's so fluid. You know, early on it looked like Giannis, and now it looks like James Harden. So, you know, down the stretch of the season, it could be a 5 or 6 man race. Of course, LeBron's always going to be in there. You got Kyrie, you got James Harden, you got Giannis. You never know who else could step up. Nobody on Golden State's going to win it because they're all going to cancel each other out. But we'll see. Anyway, peace.